I had never heard a Joe Rogan podcast. So we listened to the Joe Rogan podcast interviewing Elon Musk, driving back from my mom's house over the weekend. And how can I put this? I saw in both of those men a childishness that was very poignant in a way. And I thought, you know what we don't talk about enough is what exactly are the steps that get you from childhood trauma to adult dysfunction.
Welcome to It's Interesting You Say That. Each week, we dive into personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. I'm Jennifer Dillon, a nonprofit leader and resilience expert, and Tyler is a professional coach. We come from different backgrounds and different generations. I'm a bleeding heart liberal. He voted for Trump. But each week, we have a deep, meaningful conversation about the world today. We're glad you're here.
And I don't know enough about Joe Rogan, but I know for sure Elon Musk had a terrible, very traumatic childhood. I wonder also if Joe Rogan did.
I don't know how long the first 20, I don't know how long, first 10, 20 minutes is them just joking around with the AI. Like childish joking around.
Mm-hmm.
They get in, like maybe I get 30 minutes in and I kind of turn to my wife because we were watching it together. I'm like, I can't watch it. Like I just can't watch it. It's I think there's a time and place for playfulness. I think, especially after going through, whatever traumatic things you go through in your life, it can be very, especially as a child, it can be very hard to bring those elements back into your life and integrate them in a way that's healthy and productive. But that conversation, it just wasn't for me. And it was almost, to me, it was disappointing.
I'm not saying it wasn't funny, but when you have a guy on who's literally destroying people's lives by laying them off. But I don't think, like that connection was just completely gone from the conversation. It was the goofiness about it. And it really just struck me as a mother of a teenager who and someone who grew up with brothers. I get that humor and the goofiness and it's funny and, the fart jokes and the whatever, right? Nothing wrong with that. But we are in a very serious time. And the point that I wanted to make was that we can track back our trauma to those kinds, to what they're experiencing, what they're going through. So here's what I see, like with Joe Rogan. I see a young guy who has experienced something in his past, and his desire now is to be loved. But the way that he was kind of worshipful of Musk, like he listened to what he said, he was like, yeah, that's right. Looking up to Musk and being very deferential and accepting of everything he said. And then Musk, we could talk about it in a second, but let me just go back to what can happen in childhood. So let's say, I don't know anything about him, so I'm not going to say this happened to Joe Rogan. So I'm just going to make up a person, a character. So let's say that a kid grew up and they didn't have a father in the home. They were maybe neglected because mom was working all the time, and they maybe brought themselves up. Maybe their siblings and them kind of took care of each other. And there was just a feeling of neglect, a feeling of I miss not having a dad. These are very common things a lot of kids go through. And as he was growing up, realized that, well, I could get a lot of attention by, I guess he was a fighter, right? Like a UFC MMA fighter, something like that. And so, is that true? Is that he was a fighter?
I think he fought, I think he was an amateur fighter, but he got into acting, I want to say. And then he had his own reality. Do you remember Fear Factor? I don't know if you do.
I don't watch it. I'm not the demographic for Fear Factor, I don't think.
But yeah, so he had a couple of shows, and then I think he did commentary for the UFC when it was first starting, I think.
Okay.
I'm not super familiar, but at least I think that's roughly his background
So
or
he
professional background.
he sought a way to make money and to do the things that he was talented at. So on that surface level, it his life makes sense. Everything. I mean, he's a successful person. But let me say what happens when you do feel neglected. So these are called adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences is a study that was started by Kaiser in the 90s, like late 80s, I think, into the 90s, and is ongoing. And what they discovered was that kids who grow up in a household where they're abused in any way, where they're neglected, where there is household dysfunction, like missing a parent, um, through divorce or incarceration, when there is violence in their community, and not all of those things have to happen at once. You need to have even just one of them. And then it's dose specific. In other words, you can have one thing happen and it could affect you. You could also have it happen over and over and over. So, what happens when you're little? Your brain is developing, and your brain is looking for ways to keep you safe. We talk about this all the time, that what we do is our brains and our bodies are constantly trying to keep us alive. So, the brain starts to recognize that I'm vulnerable. I'm going to be neglected. I'm not going to be neglect just means I know in my heart, children know I can't take care of myself. I am completely dependent on this person. And that person may be the person who's neglecting them or abusing them, but they need them, right? So they have to devise ways in order to get the attention they need or to protect themselves from the abuse. And their brain will then develop their fear center so that it becomes hypersensitive to what could be going on, what's around the next corner. And literally it changes what they call the architecture of the brain. The brain now becomes much more hypervigilant to, I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be neglected. I'm going to be left behind. I'm going to be laughed at. I'm going to be abused and hurt somehow. And so we develop, and this happens to many, 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 many people. I'm not talking about Joe Rogan specifically. I'm not talking about boys and men specifically. This happens to all of us. And then what happens is we try to adapt to that. So we find ways to feel fulfilled. Okay. So now you've got someone who maybe recognizes that they can fight. So they go and they find a career in fighting, or they find that they're funny. Like I think he used to be a comedian. So you go and you do your work. So a lot of comedians, if you talk to them, great comedians have actually said this. I couldn't do comedy if it weren't for my trauma. My past trauma gave me the impetus to do comedy because it got me attention. It gave me the audience laughing felt like love. When they're very much in touch with what they're doing and why they're doing it, they recognize they're doing it for love, right? So now you have an adult who is still operating on that need to fulfill themselves, to feel that they have love coming from their comedy or whatever it is. And then it gets dysfunctional. You're a man. Tell me if what I'm saying makes sense and if you can recognize what that dysfunction looks like, if you think that I'm kind of on the right path.
I see. Maybe well, for men, the concept that love is earned
Mm.
and where it might become dysfunction. And I think too, I think that's partly true.
Mm-hmm.
I think for men, love is earned. Um, and I don't think that has to be bad. I think that can actually be a great thing. I think it actually can inspire a lot of people or a lot of men to 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 earn something, to earn love, whether that's, you earn your, not saying like you earn your wife, but like I definitely earn my wife's love. I
How
think
do you
I
do
earn
that?
my kid. I don't know. I have to be, I have to be a real person with her.
Mm.
I can't, I can come online and I can say, here's what I learned, and here's my wisdom, here's my experience. Use this, but with her, she sees how I'm getting to those things.
Yeah.
She sees who I actually am. She sees my struggle, and I have to be someone who can kind of get over those struggles and still be there for her with her needs, and still be there for the children with theirs. But also be a person who can allow them to be there for me as well. But I think men might take it to the extreme where they feel like everything needs to be earned. I need success or I need money, and so people will love me. And I think maybe, I'm not sure this is where you're going, but I think it becomes dysfunctional when like you forget that, like, the feeling of love or that positive satisfaction when people respect what you do or they appreciate what you do or they love you is separated from who you actually are and your relationship with the actual people. It's kind of like you're just getting that like a drip feed of dopamine, and you're kind of living in a fake world where you're kind of fabricating this sense of good feeling, when in reality you kind of you actually have to be there with people and be in an actual relationship, whether that's just with your wife or your kids or with an audience. You actually have to be there. And I think when you become separated, that's when um, you start to use other metrics like fame or respect or money as a replacement for actual connection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you described with your wife is she wants the real you. So what you're doing is she is challenging you to dig in and show her your true self, right? Which is very loving, which is a very beautiful thing. That's true love to me. She's not asking you to, now the inauthentic side would be that you got to earn my love because you're bringing home money. You look good on my arm. You have a certain power position, that makes me look good, right? And that is, you can see that in our popular culture, how many relationships are put out there as being true love, which are very transactional. You're beautiful and hot, and I got the money. So I'm the old bald guy with the money, and you're the beautiful hot woman. That's a transaction. I don't know. People can have real relationships and have that kind of difference in their what it looks like. But then you see, the $50 million wedding three years later is a divorce, and there's a prenup. I think we have mixed them up because popular culture says that there's a way that things look, right? So there's that kind of pattern or archetype of the powerful man earns the love of the beautiful woman, and that gets substituted for true love. And I would say this, when you said that they have to, like, you have to earn the love, there's an even deeper message there, which is, why are we not accepting that we are intrinsically lovable? And I think a lot of men never feel that in their entire life, that I am, just as I am, 100% lovable. That's hard to do. And it's hard for women too. It's not, it's just, as human beings, we don't accept that in ourselves. And when they don't feel that, then they don't feel lovable. And that can then become extremely amplified, where you have narcissists, for example, that lead cults, where they have to have people worship them, or they become presidents, or they become dictators. They use that deep, deep hole in them to motivate them towards love, but they misinterpret what it means. And that brings me back to the Rogan Musk, where I saw two little boys with a lot of deficit exhibiting a lot of these kinds of behaviors that felt very, number one, inauthentic to me. And number two, very destructive. That there was this kind of like, pretense that they were, the guys in charge, when actually they are both desperately seeking some kind of recognition, approval, or evidence that they are important, and then importance equals love. I don't think either one of them understands. I don't know about Joe Rogan, but I can see that definitely in Musk, understands how to truly fix that hole in them that I feel I can see. And that's very disturbing, because we tend to mistake that second row, that ambition for power and all that, for leadership. And then we go after it, right? And we give it a lot of power. We give them a lot of power. And I think there's a lot of people who are suffering like that don't have that kind of power, but they want to feel special. And what are the ways that we can feel special now?
I think one thing maybe about my childhood, and something that I'm dealing with very much now, is like a male role model, like a male or a man that embodies that. Because it is very I have not found a male role model other than maybe like on YouTube, like once in a while, and like far and few in between, where, and you never, and that's the problem, because in on YouTube, you can't really tell. On content, you can't really tell. But to the best of my knowledge, I've always been searching for this, like a male example of how you embody that love, but also accomplishment, and in a way that doesn't get distorted. And so I kind of found myself like looking at these podcasts, looking at these people on YouTube, and being like, okay, like, are you the role model? Like, is this the right way to do it? Is this the right way? Until I finally just kind of got in, before we started this podcast, I was telling you about, how I've been meditating all week. And this is what I've been meditating on, trying to find out like what I'm supposed to do without anybody to really give me that example. And it's been really disappointing trying to jump from thing to thing. Like, what's the example? What's the thing? What's the way? And my conclusion, at least up until now, is like there really isn't. Maybe you're lucky enough to come across a few people in your life that give you some pointers and give you some direction, but you still have to take that and apply that. So if I was to give myself, some advice about, being loved or unlovable, or, trying to replace that with success, it's not really about any of that. It's really just about what you want out of life, and like what's the most efficient way to get that. And not so much efficiency as like, you have to be productive and you have to be efficient, but just like what's going to give you the best results of what you actually want and what's really true to you, without like having to go make $1 billion and be cutthroat in business and go through and burn a whole bunch of relationships and treat yourself poorly. Like, if you can just be clear on what you want and connect yourself with people that might have some information, take some stuff from this, take some stuff from that, and just kind of piecemeal your own thing together, then like you should be all right. But you definitely can't just like try to copy and paste someone else's perspective, especially, like a Joe Rogan or an Elon Musk or a Trump. Like maybe they have some things that you want, but you have to distill that into like, maybe that's an example, but like you can't copy and paste it. It's not going to work exactly right for you. Maybe just like the lack of like decent male role models, like men having to be outside of the home to work, and just not being around the kids that much. And I think especially like for boys, just not seeing how like you can accomplish something and still be something, be lovable and still earn, like kind of like the duality, and like just a healthy role model for how it's like actually done. So I know we're probably going a bit longer than we usually do on the podcast, but do you mind if I ask you just like a couple more questions?
No, yeah, absolutely.
How do you teach men? Like how do you work with, not specific like in business, but like raising a kid, like raising a son, raising, a hard-headed son, or like even if you're a man yourself and you're dealing with these challenges, you don't want to go talk to somebody, you want to go figure it out yourself. Like, what can you give them so at least, they're prepared for the journey and they don't experience more hardship or more heartbreak than they have to, if they're not going to listen and they're just going to do it their own way anyways.
It's funny because I think and I can't say this has worked for me. I have an 18-year-old and he's very, very, very stubborn. He is going to do what he's going to do, and that's it, And I don't think there's anything wrong with power. I think the problem with male power now is that it's hard to define what is true authentic power versus what is the power that feels authentic and actually does have power, but is actually coming from a very deep wounded place. So all I'm saying is that male power, when I looked at or I listened to the Rogan Musk interview, I felt like I was listening to two little boys expressing what it feels like or what it seemed like to be people of power, but actually was riddled with misconceptions, with not understanding stuff very well, not being very smart about things. And I'm sorry, I know a few things about the world. I think I'm older than both of them. I've been around a long time. I understand. I've been to a lot of schooling. I've got a law degree, all that kind of stuff. So, and I understand how a lot of things work. And it was like, how could I be listening to these two guys that get, so much attention on them that seem so lost in just basics, and that is a problem of our socialization and how we determine what's properly male and female. So hopefully the way that I can answer your question is that what we can do is raise our children in a way that allows them to embody both the male and the female archetypal powers that are authentic to them. You might have a daughter, if you had another kid, you might have a daughter who is fierce and never going to listen to you, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and be very, very male-esque, in their drive and their motivations in life. And then she may turn 30 and become meet somebody and become very sweet and nurturing and want to stay home and, jar peaches and have 10 kids. So I think that's part of what is very scary to a lot of people in society, that we do need to have both of those archetypes and express them. And men need to be okay with expressing their nurturing side, as well as truly understanding what is power. And I think that's my question to you. How do you define authentic personal power for yourself? As a male, or as just the full-on Tyler entity on this planet?
You know what you said about like Joe Rogan and Elon and Trump, all, and for that matter, like Andrew Tate and all these, male gurus on YouTube and everything. It's kind of just like it just made me think it's like it's the same thing as it's just not sexual. It's just like it's just mental. It's just mental porn. Like it's like the very concentrated best of the best things that are going to give you the most dopamine. If you think about, I can have this money, I can have this power, I can have these girls. When in real life, like everybody knows porn is fake, but like so is all this other stuff. The real thing is going to escape you if you're looking at just the very top thing that's going to give you that straight dopamine flood. It's not how it works in the real world.
Well, one thing I'll tell you this to kind of wrap it up, because as you reminded me of something my son said. So we were listening to the Rogan show with Elon Musk, and we got home and I said something about how Tyler and I do this podcast every week, and we're different, different ages and different genders, and you vote for Trump and I'm the liberal and all of that. And we do this podcast, and I think we're able to get really deeply into subjects. And he said, yeah, but nobody's going to watch you. And I said, why? And he said, because people do that, but the way that they do it is much more entertaining. And I said, well, tell me, how is it more entertaining? And he said, because they'll have two people like you and Tyler talking, but one of them will be saying, you're a fucking asshole and you're so wrong. And I hate all these Mexicans, and then the other side will so it's overblown, over the top, arguments about different sides of a subject matter. And I said, you're right. Nobody's going to watch us unless we do that sort of thing. But what we're talking about is authentic. So you can get your dopamine fix because you watch somebody yell at somebody else, or talk shit about, an ethnic group or something, or someone's religion, but you're not going to actually get you're not going to actually get to the bottom of things. You're just going to get little dopamine hits. Oh yeah, that was a good comeback to that thing that person said. Like, it's all that, like, little boy thing. You're not getting anything. You're just being fed bullshit.
I know we're kind of in two different places in parenthood, but my wife and I just had to like cut out this really like innocent seeming TV show because they're always just talking about butts. Like, they're always making butt jokes and poop jokes. And like, I don't know, for like the last week, my son's whole thing has been poop jokes. He calls me poop dad and he calls his mom poop mom, and he thinks it's the funniest thing ever. But there's no telling him it's not.
Yeah.
But I don't, and I think part of that worries me, but at the same time, I think kind of looking at my own journey, like with my parents and what they let me do, what they didn't, and clearly the wrong path that I was on, and something that I hope kind of being on the other end of just like that male, what I call it kind of just like male stupidity. It's just like, you like the butt jokes, the fart jokes, and like, I think all guys, maybe women too, but like we all kind of have a period where we just think it's funny.
Yeah.
But having someone there to like always hold up that mirror, like, that's not funny. It's just not funny. That's not the right thing. Those aren't where your values should be. But then also kind of having like that home to come back to, or that like good example to come back to, like, oh, this is not foreign to me. I don't have to scrounge around and be like, I went to the end of the road and like, this is where it got me. It's like, oh, I went to the end of the road. Oh, and mom was right the whole time.
Thanks for tuning in. This has just been a clip of the longer podcast called The Search for Authentic Male Power. I hope you'll check it out. This is It's Interesting You Say That, a Bounce Back Generation podcast.